indie game garden.
Dave Lloyd's video games inspire me more than any other piece of media I've consumed in recent memory. Dave is a champion of the adventure game genre, having explored everything from pulpy thrillers to high fantasy adventures through the art form that has become a little more of a dark horse since the heyday of LucasArts adventure games that spanned the late 1980s to the early 2000s. The genre has decreased in popularity thanks to what some players perceive to be outdated mechanics and the rise of other similar genres like the visual novel. In our interview, Dave also goes into how large publishers just don't have as much interest in the genre anymore, particularly after first-person shooters took off. Dave's work is not only dedicated to telling outstanding stories, it's also very much about keeping the adventure game genre in the limelight while simultaneously pushing it to new heights. His magnum opus to date is The Drifter, a gritty, time-jumping thriller that also manages to portray an intimate story about love and loss in the modern day. He released the tool he used to make The Drifter on public forums for free. PowerQuest is a Unity framework that helps devs make engaging adventure games while not getting overwhelmed by the breadth of the engine at large. Dave's commitment to making adventure games communal is as inspiring to me as his masterful artwork, coding, and storytelling. It's such a genuine honor to have him on the show today. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being here. To start, I would just love to hear more about your journey to making games. So I was wondering if you could talk us through that in as much detail as you would like to go into. It'd be a joy to hear about.
Yeah, sure. Started out I think 2002-ish, and I was just starting uni, I think. And I'd kind of had a bit of an interest in programming, I guess, but I didn't really know that was I don't know. I didn't really think of it as an interest. I just like computers because I like games.
Yeah.
So I found this program called Adventure Game Studio, which let you kind of make point and click adventures in a really easy way. And so I'd kind of, I stuck some like digital photos of my backyard in and realized I could like get a character walking around. And that kind of pretty quickly hooked me on the idea of just being able to make a little story and a little game myself. And obviously at the time it was just like very simple, just like almost just playing around with this like making a game thing. But I wasn't really considering making a proper game. Fast forward a little bit, I made some games with that, and then I got a job. I sort of changed my uni course to be more focused on programming because I was really liking doing the game stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, got a job in the games industry in Melbourne, which at the time was very much making kind of movie license tie-in games where the company would sort of pitch, there'd be like studios in the US and Australian companies would pitch to basically do it the cheapest, like to make the video game adaptation the cheapest. And so they'd hire just like all these juniors who didn't know anything, and which was good for me because I got my foot in the door there. And then I learned a lot from sort of the other older, sort of slightly older like programmers and stuff there. And so, did that for a while and then joined another company after that doing like that's the start of the iPhone kind of era where for a little bit they were really kind of, it was a new whole platform of like, oh, how do you use this touch screen to do interesting things? And so that was really fun for a little while because it was almost like an early indie scene thing where you could make a tiny little game in a weekend and that could go really big and like you'd be able to make money from it. But then, our company got bought out by EA, and then they just like mandated that every game had to be freemium, and you had to try and what psychological tactics can we use to like trap people in this game and like sort of keep them playing, and then just sort of start nickel and diming them. Me and my friend Barney, we were working at the same place. Decided to quit and try doing the indie thing, which was just starting to be a thing. This is in 2013.
Oh yeah.
But even back then, like there was no guarantee you could get onto Steam. You had to really find a publisher somehow. So it was still quite early in what we consider now as the indie kind of thing. And so then so started this company Powerhoof, and made a game called Crawl, which because we were playing a lot of local multiplayer games, but there wasn't many of those around being made like properly at the time. And so yeah, so because we'd get together at each other's houses, a bunch of friends, we'd sort of were enjoying playing those games, but we had to go back to like GameCube and stuff to be able to actually find many games. So yeah, we sort of started doing that, and then we launched that game in 2014 as an early access, and then a few years later came out fully, and that did well enough for us to kind of keep going as Powerhoof and keep making more stuff. And then, last year released a point-and-click adventure, sort of going back to my roots, basically, with the point-and-click adventure stuff. Released The Drifter. I've still kind of been doing follow-up work from that a lot more than I expected because it's done quite well for us. So, really happy. I think part of our sort of plan for Powerhoof was always to just be able to keep making games ourselves and not try and like turn it into something where we're make a bit of money from a game, and then that means we can like hire heaps of people and get a fancy office and become a giant sort of powerhouse or something. We always just wanted, it's like, if we can keep doing it ourselves, that's the goal. Yeah. And so we've been pretty lucky to be able to do that. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, that's wonderful. And one of the things that I've been trying to parse through, and I'm interested to hear from you as I've been researching kind of the history of Powerhoof, is it's interesting to hear you mention the ethos kind of starting with this local multiplayer idea and making more games like that, because you have Crawl, you have regular human basketball, which is like such a funny thing to encounter. Like, oh yeah, the people who made the Drifter made this like silly, like everyone hops in a mech and plays basketball against each other type thing. And so I was wondering, like, where does your fascination with like the adventure game genre stem from? And I guess, like, I know you've been doing less commercial projects related to adventure games, whether that's like doing it for game jams or kind of working on it on the side. But what's kind of that journey been like, and what was the decision to make the Drifter into your next commercial release? Because I know you had started working on it back around the time when these first couple titles had come out as kind of a side thing. And what was kind of the confluence moment like?
Yeah. I mean, it's they're kind of the games that I guess I started out playing the most, and they always felt like the real proper games to me. Like when I got a sort of an adventure game to play, that always felt like the premium, like really big, exciting game. And I mainly played sort of PC games growing up. Like arcadey kind of games just felt like something you'd play for a little bit, but then an actual adventure had a like proper story, and it was like it was a whole big thing. And I think story in games was always important to me. Like, even stuff like Doom, like I'd always be interested in what happens, which is weird because it's not meant to be about that. But yeah, so story's always been important to me for games. And yeah, around the turn of the millennium, there was a lot less getting made. Like the budgets for them got too big, basically for the studios to kind of be able to make enough money on them, compared to something like first person shooters and things like that, which were going crazy. And so then that they had this little indie kind of, it was before the term indie, but like this little indie community growing up making games with this adventure game studio tool. And I first found that because I was looking around for free adventure games to play, like, and found, there's all these people making these, albeit very small, like kind of amateur kind of ones, but they still had that, like they still had stories, and they were still fun. And so that's kind of what got me hooked, I guess, making those sort of games. And I liked how you could kind of feel like you're directing a sort of little stage play and doing all the art, and sort of the balance of getting to do audio and writing and design, like gameplay stuff, and a bit of coding and art. So it's like all those things together, directing all these little characters to walk over here and say this line. That was just really satisfying. I really always liked that. And then obviously, I sort of got jobs in the games industry, and we were doing more like third-person platformer and 3D sort of games for console, and then iPhone stuff. But I always wanted to get back to doing point and clicks. When we started doing, started Powerhoof, I did sort of start doing some point and click stuff. Again, back with this old engine adventure game studio, but it was feeling a bit limiting while we were working on Crawl at the same time. which was made in Unity, just because it's a sort of a bit of an older engine. It's a bit dated, and I could do all this like fancy things pretty easily in Unity. And so I wanted to kind of, it took me a while to like start just making the similar kind of framework that Adventure Game Studio tool had, where it was nice and streamlined to be able to make point and click adventures in Unity. And yeah, once I sort of had that going, there was like some game jams coming up. Once we sort of launched Crawl, I got sort of roped Barney in to do this game jam, and we made this game called Peridium, which was the first time I'd ever tried to do a serious game rather than just like a kind of wacky comedy thing.
Yeah.
And that I hadn't tried writing anything seriously. I didn't really consider myself able to write anything like serious. But that I was pretty amazed at how at the reception of that, especially watching like people play it on YouTube, and I'd see for one thing, like the people people playing it on YouTube, their reactions would be like, they'd get all panicked and excited, when from this stuff that was happening in the story, even though it was sort of quite simple. And then in the comments in the YouTube were people like discussing fan theories and stuff. And this is something like I wrote in one day, like really quickly, because it was for this game jam. And so it's like, oh wow, this is like so powerful. This being able to telling a serious story is just like people feel like it's real, and it's like that was kind of magic to me. So yeah, from that point, I really wanted to do a commercial point and click, and took a couple of years before I started the Drifter, and that sort of just was sort of slowly kind of ramped up. But then it took like 6 years before it was finished last year. Yeah, but yeah, that's sort of where it came from, I guess.
Very cool. Yeah. And I guess I was wondering, just while we're on the subject of like you and Barney's collaboration and how you were working at the same company and kind of decided to go indie together. I have a question prepared regarding like your skills and how they come together in your development process. But I was also wondering like what collaborating with Barney looks like and how your skills complement one another. What were your kind of roles at this company where you first met, and do they look similar today, or have you kind of put on different hats as the indie journey has gone on?
Yeah, I think we both always kind of had it in us to make a whole game ourselves, just like solo dev almost. But I was definitely from the tech coding background, so I was like a programmer at that company, and Barney was a 3D animator, but had done a bunch of sort of 2D stuff as well. So and he did. So actually, this was going back. This is the first job we had. We first met, 2006 or something, and. Yeah, but that company eventually folded, and that was the company that was doing console kind of stuff. And then we both got separate jobs at different companies, but they both are doing iPhone stuff, but they both got bought out by EA and then merged together. So we ended up working together again, but we'd remained friends since that whole time. And also, there's other people who worked on lots of our jam games, and also Adrian Vaughan, who did the voice of the main character in the Drifter. He was he worked with us at Red Tribe, the first company as well, as a 3D character artist. So, environment artist. Yeah. And he still does environment art. So yeah, we have our sort of our niches that we sort of, I guess, were in the industry doing, but then, the revelation when we started doing indie stuff, it's like, you get to do everything again. Like when we first did it as a hobby, and so it's definitely a very different kind of kettle of fish doing game dev as a hobbyist or like solo devish kind of thing than it is doing it as a career as a in a company where it's really nice being able to do all the little bits, except for I have to do like all the business like admin stuff, which is not fun, and like accounting and legal stuff and yuck, but the good with the bad, but so we've kind of gone more back to me and Barney. So, in the Drifter, Barney was sort of art directing. So I kind of sketched out the whole game. So it was all playable, but with scrappy art that I'd done. And then Barney came in and kind of led the style, like that Drifter style is his. And then we had two other artists, Alex McDonald and Matt Frith, sort of doing character art, animation and background art too. And then Barney would kind of do a bit of a pass over that just to like bring it all into the cohesive style, which was his. And so, but at the same time, he's been working on his own project and kind of learning to get better at coding and stuff. So he's pretty pretty fluent in like C# and stuff, so he can kind of make. He's making his game Acid Knife at the same time. He's making that now full time, but he was doing that on and off during the Drifter as well. So yeah, that's and at the same time, I'm sort of my next project I'm doing art for. So we're kind of we've kind of reached a nice place where we're both sort of helping each other out, and but we're not like working on the same projects. I think for the next projects. Specifically, I guess, which is interesting. But I think part of that is like we're because it's been 10 years the companies we've been doing this, and like at the start we were like we dead aligned. Like we both want to do exactly the same thing in the same way, and then the sort of the things you want to do next start to divert a bit. So I was more getting into the adventure game stuff. Barney sort of really wants to do. He's excited about the more traditional indie kind of quirky mechanics and experimental gameplay stuff. But yeah, we're sort of able to like jump back and forth a bit between working together and doing stuff separately, which is really cool.
Yeah, that is beautiful in that it seems like it has evolved to the point where now it's almost more like a collective of two, where it's like you're able to help one another and like come in and offer expertise, but you've found these niches that you respect in one another's process. So
and I think for me personally, I think there's so much that's rubbed off from Barney's art style or Barney's like way of making art and stuff. That's like that I find that I'm able to like when I draw stuff or make game stuff, it's like, oh wow, I can kind of do this better than I expected, considering I hadn't really done it for ages. It's like I'd done little bits over the time, I guess, but it all just sort of added up because it's been such a long time, and so just from sort of by attrition, I guess I've got a little bit better. Yeah.
Right, and that learning from one another, I feel like, is one of the really valuable parts of partnership that oftentimes, even in a space like games where it is about the art, when commercial interests come into it, it's like I think, at least speaking from personal experience, I oftentimes overlook the value of learning when it comes to working with someone versus like, oh, I could do this on my own and maybe like cut corners here, cut corners there. I think that's a really important message to remember, that like the human interaction that comes from partnership and collaboration in making art, I think has a lot of these unseen benefits. So it's cool to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
And it's a good bridge into my next question, because one of the things I was remarking upon was one of the mistakes I made in planning for this episode was like, oh, Dave, you did, most of the art for the Drifter. And you're like, no, that was mostly Barney. But the reason I thought that was because I was playing another one of your games that's on itch, just the Telwinium. And you can sense there's a similarity in like the sprites and environment design. And I think like obviously the Telwinium is simpler in like what it's trying to do and how its characters move and all these things. But a similar soul is there, I can tell. And I know you did the art for the Telwinium. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about how kind of the style has rubbed off on you. And from these games, I think so many folks and myself are in agreement that you're an outstanding writer, an outstanding artist, and an outstanding programmer of games. And each of these skills on its own has value, I think, in a number of different industries in and around games. And I guess outside of the feeling of disillusionment that came along with, like you said, EA, purchasing the studio you were working at, having these commercial interests come into it, I was wondering, like, what made you decide to go indie instead of like moving on to a different company or searching for working for someone else? And was it an interest in, as you've said, kind of combining these skills to, in a sense, do it all yourself like it was back when you were making hobby games? Or what was kind of the ethos there?
Yeah, it was a hard decision because it was like it was actually a really good place to work. They treated us really well. Like I hadn't really done, like there was no crunch that I'd done there. I think there was teams there that were, but I got lucky. Yeah. So and they paid really well, and it was a nice it was a good place to work, and lots of good people there. So it was a hard job to leave in terms of that. Like I think it came down to we sort of both realizing that I think we were probably getting to almost about around 30 or something. Maybe I turned 30 just that year or something. Yeah, I can't remember. But it was like if we don't do this now and make a go of it and sort of burn through some savings, it's going to get a lot harder, because it might be, getting a mortgage or starting a family, all that stuff,
right.
which did happen. But so it was just let's originally the idea was like, well, we can at least just quit for a year. And if we completely fail to do anything, we can always ask for our jobs back, and hopefully they'll give them back and maybe we can show something like, look, we made this cool thing in a year, so we've learned a lot, so it's worth bringing us having us back. But yeah, I think basically a week after quitting and starting to make stuff myself, I was like, I can't go back. It was too kind of freeing in terms of I've been working for the last 2 years there, and I kept coming up with ideas for games and stuff. And I think the worst thing, the number one reason I felt like I needed to leave was because there's just a policy of if you're working there, you can't do any other game stuff, like any other game projects. They do have a way you can say, hey, I've got this other game project I want to do in the spare time, but it involves having to sit in front of a board and agree that they write up this big legal document, and you tell them all the little parts that your game is about, and which bits would be owned by EA and which bits would be owned by you. Yeah, and then you sit in front of this board of people and talk about it, and then maybe they say agree to it, And most of the things I want to do are like a game jam, which is starting next weekend, and that's not going to happen. So I kind of did. I did one game jam on the sly, but I felt like I couldn't really tell everyone about it because I wasn't supposed to do it, which sucked. It's so my job was preventing me, legally preventing me from doing my hobby. So that was the thing that was just killing me. And so that was a big part of it. And as soon as I started kind of being able to, I guess when I left, and I was like, oh, I'm actually allowed to just make stuff randomly, whatever I want, and it's mine now. It's not owned by some company. That was kind of exciting and special for me. I think it's a personal thing. For some people, that's really important. Other people, it's having it as a stable job is like exactly what they need, and they have different hobbies and stuff. I think for me personally, because game dev started as a hobby and was always was something I wanted to do, that made it extra hard.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think it's interesting to hear you make that distinction between folks who are in games for the job, which I think has gotten way harder to do here in 2026.
Exactly,
versus folks who are in games because they love making games, and if they can make money on it, great, but it's always going to be their hobby. Because I think a lot of the time folks just are well, I want to make games, so maybe certainly back in the mid 2010s, it was okay, so how can I get a job at one of these big companies? And I think nowadays it's how can I do everything to avoid working in the game industry that will probably chew me up and spit me out? And so it's very cool that you, I guess I'm stumbling over my words here, because one thing I've been thinking about a lot recently is the way that you do something, or at least speaking from personal experience, the way that I find joy in something is by not expecting any validation or anything in return. It's mainly about just enjoying the process of doing it. And it sounds like that's really where your love of games came from, is I just love making them, and I love, nerding out about all the different aspects of them. And I think that I guess in a long-winded way, is I think part of the earnest feeling I get out of playing the Drifter is I can tell each detail was delighted in. And I don't know, that's just a reflection I wanted to share, because it's something that I've been trying more and more to understand, particularly in this I'm in kind of like my month after finishing the Drifter, and I've like searched around for other adventure games. I've searched around for other thematically similar games, and there's nothing quite like it. So I'm trying to put my finger on exactly what it is that I think makes it special. And with that in mind, I think there are many impactful elements to the Drifter. One that fascinates me just as an enjoyer of games, as an enthusiast, is from a design standpoint, the puzzles. Because I think a lot of the things that people struggle with in coming to the adventure game genre is like the puzzles are either way too like, I have no idea how to solve this, or way too like, oh, I just take the pencil and I put it on the paper and then I give the paper to the guy. And I think the Drifter has a great mixture of not holding the player's hand, but being intuitive enough to not have to look at a guide, sitting there thinking about it for a few moments and then being able to solve it is like, I would say pretty much throughout the game, a viable way to play. And I was wondering how you went about the puzzle design and how you dialed it in, starting from your love of adventure games and making it to this, which I think is really the pinnacle of the genre, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think like I definitely, a lot of it was just playing a lot of them. So like a lot of the classic ones, but also there's so many that have been made between the 2000 to now, like because people sort of talk about the genre as having died, but it never really died. It just like the games weren't big blockbusters as much as they used to be. They weren't the biggest games on the PC. They were, of course, FPSs and stuff took over, and then so publishers sort of stopped publishing them because they knew they couldn't make as much money as some other genres. But the indie kind of community started making them, and there was always a few companies making them as well, bigger companies, but. I played so many for the sort of, I guess we called them amateur adventure games at the time, whereas now they'd be called indie. And so there was a kind of transformation that took place in that time, led by I think some adventure game studio games by people like Dave Gilbert of Wadjet where you sort of saw the puzzle side. Actually, I think it's even something that was kind of happened in the reverse, like going back to the more classic style things. There was games where the puzzles weren't so mean, and then over time they kind of got a bit meaner, at least a bit more just nonsensical in some ways, and that became one of the defining characteristics of like when a company would go, okay, let's make an adventure game. How can we like fool the player and trick them? Anyway, so that. Then going into the indie scene, started to see these people going, no one enjoys that part. Like we don't have to do that. We can have the puzzle sort of make more sense to characters, have the character, be puzzles that make sense for the character to perform in this world,
Right.
And then that kind of, I think, led to like a more modern trend of games that probably have a little bit, maybe a bit, for my tastes, too light on puzzles. Where they sort of all you're doing really is walking around talking to people, and you kind of. It's not so much that I miss the puzzles. It's just I miss that extra level of interaction where we're exploring the world and poking around, and that's kind of feeding into the story as well. And so for me, I always liked having an inventory of lots of items. That was something that mechanically felt good. Just like in a platformer, you find some mechanics which feel nice. To me, like finding inventory items, thinking about what you might use them on, using them on each other and things like that. To me, that was always a fun mechanic that I quite liked. So I wanted to do a lot of that. But I wanted to do the sort of more modern indie point and click thing of, avoiding any puzzles which I felt like were on the nose, I guess. So things which are like you'd make you roll your eyes too much, and that the character would never do in real life, So if you're stuck in a really bad situation, maybe you'd sort of combine a hook with a rope and use it to climb up something.
Right.
But like you wouldn't really do it in real life. But you can suspend disbelief enough to be like, oh yeah, that character's like he's forced into this situation where he's got to do that. And so that was a part of it for me. It made it harder to design because I was trying to make everything feel practical and not sort of like they use the term moon logic, which is basically puzzles which they only make sense after you finish them, and you can kind of then go, oh yeah, the like designer had this weird this weird crazy idea in their head that things would work this way. They don't actually usually work in real life. So it's trying to keep it grounded in the world was a big part of that, and a lot of sort of iteration with like playtesters and making sure that if there's something that people are missing or getting stuck on, then I would kind of write hints in the descriptions. So like if you use an item on something and it's not the right thing to use it on, I could use that opportunity to write a little hint about what you are supposed to use it on. So you kind of just get guided ideally without it feeling too handholdy. Mm-hmm. But I was still like, it's such a balance, and it was, it's a really challenging thing in making a point and click, because I think usually the puzzles for the whole entire game, there might be 1,000 puzzles in the game, but any point and click just gets judged by its worst puzzle. And the one place people get stuck, that's like, this game, the puzzles are all like this one thing that the guy got stuck on, and so that's the one people remember. And it's the same for throughout history of adventure games. The one puzzle people remember from any game is the one that they hated. It's not like their favorite moment, so it's a challenging thing to do, but I think the goals I set myself were part of the reason that the game took so long. But I think it worked out. I think I'm definitely glad I tried to make them sort of as streamlined as I did. But I think I also just underestimated how easy it still is to for me to miss something, like miss a sort of way that players can not see a bit of sort of breadcrumbing that's meant to lead them to a puzzle. They miss one thing, and then I'll watch them playing them, like, oh, of course they can miss that, because if you don't click this thing, or if you, I don't know, it's a tricky thing, but it's I guess it's what I when I play AAA games now, I think I tend to get put off by the handholdy stuff where it's like they'll tell the player, okay, I think we need to investigate the old mill. But then they don't let the player go, oh, okay, cool, I'll go to the old mill. They then have a big mini map thing with a big icon and a big compass with a node, and then you don't even need to listen to the person say that you've got to go to the old mill. You just follow the waypoints, and it tells you exactly. You just get led to where the next thing is. And so, to me, that takes a bit of the immersion and engagement out when I play those games, because I just get bored of. I just feel like I ignore what everyone's saying and ignore the actual story and just follow the waypoints. I just can't help it, and then I end up enjoying the game less, because I'm not able to get. All I'm doing is basically following waypoints, and it's kind of boring. Whereas as soon as those are taken away, I'm like, oh, okay, I better listen, and then I get more and more engaged as I play. So that's kind of part of it for me. But it is a challenging way to design, I think.
Yeah, well, it's that sense of ownership that fascinates me, and why I'm glad I heard it in your answer, because my partner and Jamie and we play games together, and one of the things she was like really fascinated by with the Drifter is like she's never really gravitated toward adventure games, and like I've been playing some after the fact that I've enjoyed, and she's been asking like, is it as good as the Drifter? Like, well, I like it, and like my honest answer is like no, because it's like it's like these other adventure games I'm playing, you have to be interested in adventure games, I think, to enjoy them. And I think one of the things the Drifter is so good at, and that you obviously put a premium on in your design philosophy, is like having the puzzles there to enhance immersion and enhance like the player paying attention, like you said. And it's a sensation I got throughout the Drifter that I was so interested in, where it's like I didn't feel like I was Mick, but I felt like I was so invested in what is happening to Mick. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so much more meaningful to me than, for instance, one of the new AAA games you're talking about, where you get a full character creator, you can make yourself and you can name the character yourself, but you're still not, you don't care about them, because like you said, you're just kind of following along the path the game is telling you to follow, instead of really trying to figure it out for yourself. And yeah, so I think that's a perfect answer. I was wondering, before we kind of dive into the tools that surround the Drifter and a bit more generally, I was wondering if you could tell me more about how the Drifter itself came together kind of from this initial idea to execution. It sounds like it started as something you were just playing around with, and then later on you kind of gradually added team members to kind of get it through the finish line. But would you mind talking a little bit more about its development process?
Yeah. The first few years was just me working on it. So like I'd kind of, I think I was still working on regular human basketball, but I kind of started toying around with ideas and kind of wanted to use Adrian, the voice actor. It's a friend of ours. And he did a really good gravelly Australian voice that we did in this game jam. And I think in the meantime, we'd done another couple of game jam adventure games as well. So yeah, like there was Peridium was the first one, and then Alluvium, and then we did this Inanimate Mr. Coat Rat game, which was like it started out trying to pretend it was a horror game, and then quickly you realize it's a farce kind of comedy. And yeah, so I was kind of the first sort of picture in my head was like, oh, maybe it's like this like kind of Aussie guy who's sort of down on his luck, sort of working class, I guess, and like practical, and he sort of rocks up in a town and is like, you're going to see what's going on, I guess. So it was, and that kind of fed into it being like a drifter guy pretty quickly. And then like I think I kind of imagined I wanted something to really kick it off fast, because I think in one of my, the first game jam game, it kicked off quite like I wanted to start it with like a lot of layers of tension built up. So Peridium, you start with you're in the Antarctic and you're trapped in you're locked in a kind of base thing, and it's freezing, and you think there's like zombies and something's banging on the door and there's a dead guy in there with you. And so it was like layering all these different things on, and that's right at the start. And so for the Drifter, I wanted to do the same. And I kind of wanted to see how quickly I could get you into the action. And so the Drifter starts with you. You get a little bit of just like introduction to like, oh yeah, you're a drifter and you're a boxcar, and you sort of come back to town. And then pretty quickly you're getting shot at and you see someone killed in front of you in the first sort of 5 minutes kind of thing. And then, yeah, so that was something I kind of pictured quite early, is like, because I'm like, oh yeah, how do I establish he's a drifter? I guess he'll be, he could be like, riding the rails or whatever. And then I guess there's got to be a murder because that's exciting. So I had to chuck a murder in there. And then I think the other sort of very early image I had was the bit where you're sort of drowning and you've got a bag over your head and you've got to kind of escape. And then you take this thing off your head and you see there's all these other people who've been thrown in the river all there as well. And it's like, because for me, that was a very evocative, like, you want to see what's going on. And yeah, the other element, I guess, was the time jumping back in time kind of thing, which came from the first jam we did. There's a lot of places that worked really well where you'd have these sort of really tense scenes. Like there's one where the characters, you're supposed to like try and get this cord down from the roof, and then like there's like a flash, and then suddenly you're being hung from the neck by it, and you sort of because the character's like freaking out and hallucinating, and you're like, oh no, why is he doing this? He's like, and the players would really panic and like try and madly click and stuff like that, which worked really well. And I was surprised that worked at all in a point and click, but it was also a bit weird because there was no way of having the character actually die, and so it was kind of I didn't want to have the player just, if they do the wrong thing, they die, and then it just says, like, do you want to restore a game? Because that felt like that would just break all the immersion. And so my idea was like, oh, you can die and you can basically restore a game back to a checkpoint, but the character's aware that happened. It's like a time sort of jump thing, and so that way I could have all these sort of fun and tense moments with deaths and stuff, but also keep it immersive, and then also feed into the plot and like that, make that part of the story and part of the mystery that at the start of the game you're like, what the hell, what's going on? How's this character doing this? And so, yeah, again, like I was trying to layer the tension on with that jam game, I was sort of trying to layer on different mysteries right from the start to sort of have as many things as possible, kind of keeping people hooked on the game, I guess, on like the story side of things. So I think those were the things which were kind of led down to what became the Drifter. And in terms of development, it was like the first few years I was doing story stuff, which I thought would be much easier because I'd done the jam thing and I wrote it all in like a day or something, and then I was like, I've just got to do a bunch of those in a row. But then found that as soon as you have a story which is more than just one beat basically and one like little character arc, the complexity goes up exponentially. So you kind of it took me ages. A lot of like just staring into the abyss, going, "Oh no, what's like?" There's so many things that could happen next, but like, what's the right idea? And sort of just like chiseling down to the one thing which ends up happening in the game. Like some of the chapters get very complex, and then that stuff took me ages. So I was sort of the game took me way longer than I hoped, just because the game jam things flow so easily. So the first few years was me doing that, and I kind of had it all playable. So it was all my sort of I kind of just chose like 4 or 5 colors, and I just always just sketched out backgrounds with those colors. I think like maybe what you're talking about, where you can sort of see some, I guess, through line from the art into the Telwinium, is partly because I did a lot of the kind of angles and camera stuff I chose. Because I was doing it so rough, I could be pretty experimental with like where the camera angles a little bit, and that's something. And then Barney would sort of paint over and usually keep pretty much the structure of the room, because I'd have it sort of all working in game, so that testers could test it before Barney had to go and put art in. So I wasn't like getting him to do art and then going, actually this part doesn't work, we'll throw all that art away. So I had like whole game playable just as like mock-up art, no voiceover and stuff, so that I could like chapter by chapter kind of get testers playing it and sort of iterate on the puzzles to make them sort of flow nicely, and on the story. That's something I sort of learnt with writing, is that you kind of want to write through to the end, because there's so much you discover as you're writing something. And then once you've kind of got to the end, then you kind of know what happens. You can, because what you think your ending is going to be sort of changes. Once you know that, then you can go back and add foreshadowing and sort of, underpin the themes that you kind of realize are a big core part of it. And so you can kind of strengthen it that way. I kind of did that as a sort of a second pass before, and then chapter by chapter got testers playing it, did a bit of iteration, and then getting each chapter arted up, which was again another long process. But every part seemed to take a long time. There was no sort of big mistake we made where like it meant that it took a long time because we did something wrong. Just every little part was slow, I guess. Just felt like it took a while.
Well, that's fascinating to hear about. I wonder, I see this obvious love of storytelling, and I see you light up when you talk about, well, gotta throw a murder in there, and like kind of a fascination with this like pulp thriller genre. And I was wondering, like, have there been any influences, whether in games or movies or what have you, that have like ignited that interest in you, or has it just always been something you've been fascinated by?
I think it's like, it kind of was a bit of both. Like I always liked that. I always liked kind of that kind of stuff. I think I was probably more into, like, growing up more into like either sci-fi or fantasy like novels. I know, but Barney is a huge like horror fan, and so that was partly why the first Jam game, Peridium, was a horror game, because it was like Barney wasn't as into the point and clicks. I was like, oh no, I'll make it a horror thing, then he'll want to do it with me. And also, so but I over the years read a bunch of like Stephen King and different like thrillers. I always liked like Michael Crichton and stuff as well. Always loved those books ever since I was a kid, I think. It was like, okay, I guess I'm making a thriller, so I'll like grab up, start reading thriller novels a lot more again. And so it was an excuse to like watch all of like John Carpenter's films again, and like read a bunch of Michael Crichton and Stephen King, and like every other like bit of like pulp fiction I could get my hands on. And that was, I loved that part, for sure. And so it all fed into sort of like coming up with ideas as I was playing, as I was designing things. I'd be reading something and be like, oh, that's an interesting kind of way something could work, like a character, how a character works or something like that. And so it was old, especially like older films, like 70s, 80s stuff. I tend to like more, gravitate to more, and lots of books as well. But there wasn't really a single thing. I kind of say on the Steam page, King, Crichton, and Carpenter, because it sort of sounds good. But it was definitely not just those were definitely influences in different ways. But there's a lot that went into it. I think probably the Michael Crichton tech thriller stuff is probably the biggest influence in terms of the overall structure of like having this sort of a character who's sort of forced into this crazy technology world a bit, and then it all goes wrong, which is how all those books are. And it's such a satisfying kind of trope for me. Like I love it every time.
And I think just like the most successful versions of all those authors you mentioned, just like their most successful projects, like The Drifter is about all of these things, has all this action, and yet if I had to like distill it down into one word that it's about, it's like family. It's like these things that are still very human and that can be like told through this lens, and I think that's what we can connect to.
Cool. I think it like that's something that I noticed. Partly because I was starting out as like not knowing really anything about writing. I was just very much like, throw things. I don't know. I didn't really know why some things worked or whatever. But it was when I started reading and like sort of thinking about the books I was reading more, it was, and also just how, when I was finding it hard writing and was reading authors, I was like, oh, wow, how do they do this? This is amazing. One of the things which was amazing, even in like quite schlocky books, they always have like, and they call it in horror movies, they call it like the kitchen table moment. So it's like the bit at the start of any horror movie where the families, like the characters are sitting around a table and they're just being themselves, and that's always interesting and fun. Like, and you get to know them and they become real people. And there's always like a theme. There's something that's like each character's got a personality, and that's got to feel real. Because if it doesn't feel real, then it's then the horror doesn't work as effectively, because you don't really you want to kind of care about what happens to these characters. That's what makes it really hard to stop watching these movies and makes them so fun to watch. And so realizing how important that was, even in fairly schlocky B movie stuff or like Pulp Fiction-y kind of novels. That's the thing which makes them. You need to have that layer there, and that's a sort of important thing. So it was kind of something I had to make sure I kind of got right, I think, or at least, it was, I think it's something that I realized that I can't ignore that and just, because it's a video game, I just make a scary monster and then the player will be scared, so I think it was, I actually really enjoyed learning about writing as I was making the game. I think there was just, I didn't even realize how much there was that I had to learn, and there's still, I don't consider myself a good writer compared to a lot of novelists, just because that is so much harder in terms of the way you've got to write. Like I have all these crutches of like, I can just put in some cool art and like, and also even just have like voice actors voicing it, like adds so much character and depth. Whereas if you're just writing a novel, like you've got, there's nothing there between, the words and the reader, so it's, and there's so much that goes into every sentence. It's like, it's pretty impressive to me whenever I still reading books, I'm always impressed. Like it always strikes me how good people are at writing. So I'm still something I'm kind of excited to sort of get better at. So
one of the things that I think, I don't know if this is conscious or not, but like you're obviously learning a lot from these, titans, these creators who are in a way, through their writing, like passing things along. And one of the things that has inspired me so much about your work and your process is you've created PowerQuest, which is like essentially allowing other people who have, way less of a facility with something like Unity or something like coding to have access to these tools that could help them, whether it's get started in games or make their own commercial game or whatever they would like to do. And so I was wondering, like, tell me more about PowerQuest. I know it's something you've been working on for years and years, and it's an incredible contribution to community. And so I was wondering, like, what was the thought process behind wanting to release it in the first place? Is there kind of a philosophical underpinning there to you sharing your creative tools, or was it mostly just something you had always thought of doing?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like I started making it. Yeah, as I said, I sort of used Adventure Game Studio, which is really nice and streamlined for making point and clicks, but also a bit clunky and outdated in some ways compared to Unity, which you can make super modern games in Unity. But yeah, Unity, because you can make anything in it, every little thing is so complicated, and so I did want to streamline that down for myself by doing. Yeah, making the sort of workflow in it a lot closer to Adventure Game Studio. And yeah, I think at some point I kind of realized that there was a few things I did in it which I think made me feel like, oh, this is good enough to share, which then I think just because of how much I liked being part of that Adventure Game Studio community, a bunch of people just as a hobby, they're just making adventure games, and talking about them, and they're sort of, that was such a kind of, it's a big part of what inspired me to make games and feel like it was possible for me to make games. So I guess, I don't know when I decided to, I can't remember when I decided to to put it out there as something other people can use, except that it was like, it's a bunch of work to do it for myself, and it's something I sort of wanted for myself. And yeah, I mean, having it be something other people can use is made sense as well. But yeah, it's been very rewarding. Like it's work, but the work is always kind of directed towards being something that I'm using myself anyway. And then, there's features in there that like I wasn't potentially going to use, but were fun to add and quick to add. So a lot of the time it was, when I was working on the Drifter, I needed just a distraction to like take a little while away from like thinking about the game. I could just jump into doing some pure like coding stuff for the engine, which was always fun to do. I know it sounds kind of weird, but the writing tools I found, even working on Crawl and stuff, where I was just making little mini tools for Barney to use or something like that. It's very rewarding because you kind of, it's kind of easier than game development, where a game is this big vast thing where a lot of the time every feature is sort of impacting a lot of other things. Like, so it might be, if it's just like a story beat, that's going to affect all these other things that happen in the story. And so you've got to keep, it's a very complex thing to keep in your head. Whereas just adding a little feature, so there's like, a hotkey where you press something and it just like runs this little, like does a few steps, and like now you've created a new prop in the world or something, and it just makes it slightly easier than having to do it manually by clicking a bunch of things with your mouse. That's such a quick, easy thing to write, and it feels so productive. And so it's really satisfying doing that. So I've always found doing the tool stuff really fun and satisfying. It's easy to get a little feature in, and then people appreciate it as well once there was people using it. So I think it's been really good, and having built sort of having this community kind of coming with that on our Discord or whatever, like making stuff and asking questions that are usually very easy for me to answer because I've like done it for the Drifter. And I was like, oh, this is how I do it, I find that really enjoyable, really satisfying. And I'm proud of the PowerQuest engine thing as well. Like, I think it does good. I don't really like Unity as a company. The core of Unity as the engine is like super solid still, but I'm never kind of, I don't really, I think most of what they've done in the last 10 years, like I don't need for my game dev stuff, because I just do things my own way, or I'd used an asset which already did it, or I'd written something myself to do it, and then they'll add that feature, but it won't be the way I would have done it. So it's like,
right.
That's funny. It's a bit weird, but in an ideal world, I would be using Unity, but I'd have something that's as good. Like, I think Godot's still maybe got a bit of a way to go, but We'll get there. Yeah, we'll see.
It's interesting. My dad is way more of a tech person than me. He's like had been in software his whole career, and we were poking around in PowerQuest together. And one of the things that he was like remarking on was how it's kind of wild that a company like Unity, like that big, and obviously, especially in recent years, pivoting that much toward like making as much money as they can, like still even has, you know, versions from 6 years ago. Because like one of the things with PowerQuest is like, still, well, you should use the 2020 version. Like it's the most supported with the tools I've built. And my dad was like, it's so wild that, you know, even in this game space, which now people are saying like, oh, it's unprecedented money grubbing and like commercial behavior. It's like still so computers that they're like, oh yeah, but you can download the like 2019 version still.
Yeah, true.
But correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave. It sounds like the importance of community, at least to a degree related to PowerQuest for you, is like it's a way to stay present and connected while you're, you know, thinking of these way broader or like loftier concepts, trying to build them into your game, or thinking about like a plan that can sometimes feel overwhelming. The PowerQuest community has kind of been a present, hands-on thing you can do. Is that a fair summary?
Because there's a lot of stressful parts of like my job, I guess. And like the big games are hard. Like the Drifter was not easy like to make. It was like a lot of like, you know, waking up in the middle of the night going, how is this taking so long? What am I doing wrong? What am I going to do? How am I going to fix this? And so that was a lot of it felt like pulling teeth, because, you know, just any big project, I think it's just like, it's so much work and there's so many little elements to it. So the smaller games are always really fun, and I'm just as proud of the small games that I did in like a weekend or something, partly because like I only did it in a weekend. So whereas the Drifter took 6 years, of course it's gonna be good. Like that took me ages. It's a similar with like going to a fancy event or something and meeting game devs that are like really well known or whatever. I think I get just as much satisfaction from like a guy who's never made a game before, just like making a game with his kids, you know, and on the PowerQuest community, because and like sharing that stuff, because it's like, sweet, that's the thing that made me fall in love with making games as a hobby. So it's not like because I get to like, it's not like trying to it's the same as me and Barney, like keeping the company just a really small thing. So some people really want to build up and have this big fancy thing and throw big parties at GDC and stuff like that. But that stuff, that's just not something that's ever appealed, or I've never kind of got enjoyment out of that on a day-to-day basis as much as the smaller stuff, I think. Like, so that's just, that's the kind of, the way I like to do it, I guess.
That goes back to, I think, what's so endearing about the Drifter is like, you can tell the small stuff is what matters. And while it's, you know, come together eventually over this long development process into this very impactful, sometimes lofty story, like I think the reason it's so delightful is because you can load into the game at any moment and there's like all these things going on, whether it's like you walk across, you know, a chain link fence that has been knocked over and you hear the chain links, or whether it's like the voice acting, as you've talked about, or the puzzle design, which we've kind of gone over at length, or the art, or each thing you can tell has been, you know, sweated over to a degree. And it sounds like that was not always a pleasure, but it has created this hub of you know, pleasure and of enjoyment. So that's awesome to hear. I know I've had you for a while now. I want to be respectful of your time. I just have 2 very quick questions. Well, it can be as quick as we want.
No, all good. I'm the one rambling, so it's fine.
No, I love it. That's what I'm here for. If you could give some advice to an aspiring game maker, what would it be?
Same advice I always give is just like make small games. Like start making little things. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because they've got in their head their one big game they want to make. So there's like a tendency to sort of fight with that, but like a small game can be so easy, and it should be fun doing even a small game, because the fun has got to be in making the games and not just having some game at the end, like some lofty goal at the end. So, but I think the best way I think to do that is to like make the game for someone. So like make it for your mum or your brother or like a friend, and make it like specifically for them. And then you can still put it up on itch.io and share it with everyone. But I think as soon as you have one person as your audience, compared to trying to make a game for everyone in the entire world, you'll actually find that you get to make something personal, and it's a lot more fun. You don't get, because of just making it with one person, you don't get trapped into like making it perfect. You're just sort of making a little joke for them, and I think that's a great way to sort of to do the whole, do all the things that go into making a game, and have a little thing. You always have to solve some problems, and to do that, you got to learn a bunch of stuff, and you got to, so it's a good way to start, I reckon. And game jams are really good for that as well, because they just give you a really tight deadline. And the worst case that happens is that you spend a few days or a week, or some spare hours in a week, and not getting much done, but like, or making something that you think is like not that great. But you always learn like heaps, even just doing that, because your brain's like thinking about new ideas that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise, So definitely, game jams and just making something for your mum. That's like my advice. And it can even be like using Twine or something, where you just type out a little dumb story and put some like hyperlinks in, and that's it. The game's done, and it took you half an hour. And so
yeah, that's such a good tweak to, I feel like, the more mainstream advice of like make something small or make small games is like make a small game for one or a few people.
I think like because people say, oh, you should make Pong first, but it's like, you can already picture what it would look like in your head when you've made it. So it's kind of like, well, I don't need to make it. I know exactly what it is. Like, but if you're like, oh, how would I make Pong for my mum? It would be like, well, she really likes this and that. Oh, maybe I could do this. Oh, I could do this, and you start to have little ideas, and that makes it fun, and that's actually part of game development, because usually game development isn't make the game that someone already made, because that's not what the objective is. So but if you do want to make like a giant huge fantasy game, you're going to be doing that whole process like about a million times. So if you don't even like doing it once, then like
right, great advice. Last question is, what's something that keeps you, or a number of things that keep you feeling whole and nourished outside of games? Other hobbies, other interests, family stuff.
Family. So I've got a kid, 11-year-old son, and I think I have a pretty decent work-life balance, in that like I mostly keep to like just regular work hours, because I worked in the industry. Whereas Barney's different. He's the artist side, so he's like works crazy hours, I think. But he does have a kid as well. So when you've got a kid, it's different, because like you got to help out, and right. If you can work until 4 a.m., but you're still going to get jumped on at 6:30 in the morning. So, I don't know. Like I've like play guitar and stuff, which is just as like basically like doing karaoke by myself, because like I don't have any aspirations to do it well. I just annoy my family, and. Yeah, I don't know. Just I think what's partly nice about the adventure game thing, and just because it's a storytelling medium, is like it's a very good excuse to find inspiration in lots of things. So it's always worth seeing, like going and seeing a film, or like watching films and reading books and going places, because it's all like good experience you can feed into like storytelling. It's just true of storytelling in general. I think you don't want to just shutter yourself away and only look at, like, you definitely just don't want to, as a game developer, just look at the games that have been coming out in the last, whatever the games that are in the last month. You sort of want to be pretty broad. I do like sort of retro gaming as well, like playing lots of old, especially old DOS games and stuff like that. It's a fun hobby as well.
Not to trick you, but if you have time for one more question, it just occurred to me. It's something that I've been considering a lot recently, and I would love to hear your take on it. If you have thoughts, what do you think keeps you coming back to like storytelling? What appeals to you about it? It's something I've been thinking about just on like a human level and on a creative level of like, it's not like we're not satisfied with our real lives in quotes, but it's more just like it feels like such a core at least to me, like a core part of existing is like being interested in hearing different stories and hearing them told.
I mean, I've definitely always read as an escape thing since I was a kid, like partly, like I love that sort of escapist, but I think that part of that is like you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and they're like always a different kind of person in a different world and stuff. So I think that is good for broadening your mind in general. I find when I every now and then I haven't been reading much, and then I decide, okay, I'm going to leave my phone in my room when I get up and like read a book for a bit, and like I'm definitely better off like mentally when I'm doing that. Like there's something a lot better for me about reading than there is about looking at Twitter or whatever. You know, like I come out of it like a lot happier, I think, in the morning when I do that. But it's very hard to get into that habit when you're like, oh, maybe I'll just look at YouTube or whatever. But I don't know. I definitely not something that's the same for everyone. But for me, I've always been interested in story and plot stuff. Like if that's not capturing me in a game, even if the gameplay is amazing, like it's hard for me to persist. And so. But then there's like obviously that's not true for a lot of people. Probably I don't know. At least probably most people are like, I don't need a story in a game. That's that's irrelevant. It's not a movie. It's a game. I think it's just a personal taste thing.
Yeah, it's just it's one of the things I come back to a lot in these interviews where it's like it's so fascinating that Call of Duty is called a game, The Drifter is called a game, and Slay the Spire is called a game, and if you say I like games, you could be referring to any number of those three things or just one or what have you. So it's fascinating stuff. Well, Dave Lloyd, thank you so much for being here on Indie Game Garden. I really appreciate your time, and it was just an honor to talk to you as one of my favorite game devs. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
And that was Dave. Wow. One of the pleasures that I have in doing this show is getting to talk to some of my game dev heroes, and Dave is pretty close to the top of the list. You could probably tell from the interview I gush so much about how he's good at so many different facets of the development process, but overall I just think he's an incredible storyteller and has an amazing joy that he puts into his games, and I think that's the exact thing that I look for with this show in particular, is like games that can help us break through apathy and feel things and really feel connected to the medium, and I think Dave has a particular knack for that. So such an honor to have him on, and it's a joy. I don't really know what more I can say. At this point in the schedule, it doesn't match up chronologically because we've scheduled some shows out at this point, but I have just recently gotten back from some travels and just recently gotten back from my aunt's funeral. She passed suddenly and shockingly while I was abroad, and it was a roller coaster of emotions, kind of getting back to the States and immediately heading out to Houston to hear from her community for her celebration of life. And I honestly haven't been as into the idea of games recently. I've been more reflective and ponderous, I think, even than usual. And so while I have kind of dipped a toe into vampire crawlers, the new deck builder from the Vampire Survivors folks that by all sort of measures is going to be addicting to me at some point, and Titanium Court, which just came out recently, which of course won the GDC award, and is by A.P. Thompson, an incredible designer, and continuing to look at Slay the Spire 2 and a number of other games that would usually, I think, catch my fancy and more. It's been harder and harder for me to feel invested in them, which I think is why this conversation in particular about the Drifter meant a lot to me, because it just feels like a timeless game that I will enjoy throughout my life, even when perhaps my focus isn't on games as much. And so, yeah, thinking about family, thinking about love and loss, and just so grateful for the conversation this week. I will be back with you next week, I'm sure, with another conversation where I'll probably bloviate and go on and on about things that the guest may or may not care about. But it just means so much to me to do this show and get to reflect on some very good art with some very good people. So you're part of that. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.